Hey everyone. So I just want to show you how I get started with a project using um, kind of a doc-driven development approach. So the reason I'm on my desktop is I just want to show you, I keep this folder called Sub-Agent Starter handy on my computer outside of any project. And in this, I've got like a pretty decent structure for doing doc-driven dev with Claude Code. I've kind of I vibe coded this itself. I sat down with Claude, really explained, hey, what I would love to do is create uh, a little bit of a directory to guide Claude code while I'm coding. And some of the goals are like I want Claude to avoid boiling the ocean all at once, so trying to build the app as fast as possible. It's like no, like when you do that, you skip too much, or you just kind of like go with the most basic approach. So how can we give Claude or a sub agent the smallest piece to work on at any given time, but still keep track of how all the pieces fit together, um, so that Claude's attention on any given piece is maximal, but we're making sure our plan is cohesive. Um, and so to do that, Claude needs to update itself and its documentation. So at the highest level, it knows where we're at in the project and the architecture and the dependencies. And then at the execution level, its tasks are accurately created. So the way I did that was I created this doc structure, and the key of it, this is more of like Claude's memory bank. Sometimes we add files here if we're pausing on working on something. Um, but it's this specs folder that matters the most. And in it, we have vision, themes, epics, and features. And so vision is where I work at the beginning of a project to add in product requirement documents and refine them with Claude until we're feeling confident. And those give like the overarching goals, the user story, the value prop, all that, and maybe some high level architectural decisions. Here's where we want to deploy the app. Here's kind of budget constraints, things like that. Then the next step is getting started, and getting started means, all right, we've got to start breaking down our vision into some big thematic buckets. So what I'll do is work with Claude and some subagents. I'll show you in a second to do that breakdown. And then after we do that breakdown, it's like, okay, let's pick a component of one of those themes and break it down into epics. So how do we break it down even further? And then once we have our epics, we want to start talking about, well, what are the features within each of those that we need to build? So we do a further layer of breakdown. And once we have our feature list for a given epic, for a given theme, um, that's when I'll tell Claude, okay, let's start knocking out these features, and take them one at a time. And, make sure you're continuing to scope the features with vision, theme, and epic in mind so that they all, are mapping dependencies and making sure that decisions they're making aren't breaking, and, produce a pretty elegant code base. And so the way I do that is with this .claude file, we've got some commands, which I'll show in a second, but these agents. And so when I'm beginning to do that documentation breakdown, we'll call some planning agents. We've got an epic designer, a feature designer, a theme planner, and a vision architect. So I've got specific agents to help me do that documentation breakdown. And that just looks like a conversation in the terminal, where I am talking with Claude at the beginning about our vision, refining the PRD I've put in there. I usually do my PRDs in Claude Desktop, just a habit. And then I put the files in our directory, but we refine. And then I'm like, okay, let's break it down in the epics, and it'll call the epic designer. And then let's break it down into features. So it'll call the feature designer, or theme, epic feature. And we might need to have some technical considerations, some architecture, how's our plan looking architecturally? So these are like the planning subagents. And I'll use them occasionally once we're deep in a project just to like, hey, we made a pretty big decision. Let's update and make sure we're not misaligned. Um, And then once we start get going, we have an orchestrator, um, which will help us call the right subagents for both the planning and the development and implementation. We've got some different engineering agents here. We're trying to follow test-driven development, so both the front end and the back end agents should be, writing tests first against a feature and then doing development, doing the testing, updating our documentation, and handing off components to each other if needed. And, the key is, reminding Claude at the beginning of every session, hey, we're following doc-driven dev. Make sure that you know, you're referencing our documentation as we get started. And then at the end, you're updating the documentation. So whatever we've built, whatever decisions we've made, make those updates. So they'll come back to our docs and update the files here as we build. So we're keeping a source of truth of where the project's at, what we're building, how things fit together. And Claude can always reference these as we continue to build the project out. So those are the two main components, and I take those and I drop them into a new starting directory. Let's just focus on that. So here I'm building like a slide deck generator. So just to get started, I have the folder for the project, and I've copied in my .claude with all those agents and my docs with all of these folders. And then I've dropped in the plan. So I've worked with Claude Code and scoped out, my requirements for this tool. So I have that now in my vision, and let's get started here. So I'll say like, all right, hey, let's get started aligning on the vision of my project. Please, actually, let me show you a cool tool I'm trying out. Voice to text. So, hey, let's get started aligning on the vision of this project. I've added PRD documentation to the vision folder in specs. Please review, report back your understanding, and ask me any questions you have about the intention of this project, what success looks like, and how we might go about building out a code base to complete this project. So that voice to text is pretty handy, just saves typing time. And I find that it allows me to be more articulate because, if I'm typing so much, I'll get lazy. But if I'm talking, it's a little bit easier. So I could be more detailed and prescriptive. So now Claude Code will read through those vision documents. We'll have a conversation here. First conversation was Claude Desktop. Let's make some documents. There, we're doing lots of research. Here are the goals I have. How can we achieve it? What are some ways we might achieve it? When we get to a good place, we make the documents. I bring them into this directory in our project folder and load them into our kind of vibe coding setup that I've got here. So now I'll have a conversation with Claude Code here in Terminal just to make sure these are, looking good. We're getting kind of a second opinion. And then what we'll want to do is start breaking down into themes and at least themes. And then I might pick a theme, break it down into epics, pick an epic, break it down into features, and we'll start implementing. So let's see what Claude said. Okay. So the problem I'm trying to solve is, I don't want to make slide decks anymore, and I want them to be branded and aligned with a learning experience design that I approve of. And Claude Desktop's pretty good at making slides now, but I want a lot of specific control over the kind of slides it makes and how it makes them, and how the system learns to improve the slide outputs and the overarching deck output. So that's why I'm building this local tool. So let's see what questions it has. It's usually where I go to. Okay. intent, current pain level. I don't want to answer that now. Who else will use the system? That's a good question. Failure mode. Okay. So now I'm gonna, it's 12 questions. It's a little bit much to answer here, but we can do it, and you can follow along if you like. So intent. Look, I just don't want to make slide decks anymore, and Claude's gonna make all the slide decks. I'm gonna give it the lesson outline, um, and it's gonna make the deck. And this tool, I'd like to be able to generalize it eventually to any kind of slide deck. So a marketing deck, a sales pitch deck. But right now we're focused on building learning assets. So we're going to do that. I would like to share this with other teammates, but this is a Claude Code driven solution, so it'll just be people who have Claude Code. Um, Failure mode. So yeah, bad pedagogy, inconsistent look and feel, brand violations, all of that matters. None of it doesn't matter. So prioritize all. Um, I have all the templates ready. I'm going to provide them once the code base is built. They are consistently structured, um, and we will need to analyze them with our tool. That's something we're building, a template analyzer, and exemplar analyzer. Yeah, we have the lesson materials. I'll provide an input to test the system. No problem. Brand guide. I will provide exemplar materials, and we will extract those principles. That's part of the architecture. Tell me if you don't understand that. Environment. We're going to do WSL. We might need to install dependencies. No problem. I'm working on personal computers, so no IT constraints. No workarounds. So a workaround is like when you try to implement, a feature, um, you find that you hit some barrier. Maybe you can't run a command. Maybe you can't find a file. Maybe you can't find some code. And instead of reporting back, hey, I got stuck, you try to find a different solution. We need to stay intentional with our designs, report when we get blocked, and talk about trade-offs of workaround decisions or how to get unblocked. Um, yeah, I mean, we're going to build the full system. This is a small enough piece of software that the MVP should be super high fidelity. Um, I have a first lesson in mind. I will provide it once we're ready to test the system. Sub-agent architecture. So here's a tricky point. Do not confuse our coding structure of .claude, docs, context, specs, with the sub-agents we're going to build for this slide deck generator. Those are two separate buckets. And then the HTML to PPTX path, we should explore that as needed. It might be needed if that's the most elegant way to empower Claude to build the slide decks we're looking for. We're going to have to find out. You tell me. So you can see that voice to text, super useful for like this extended feedback. Normally I would copy this, paste it into a Notion page, answer everything, and paste it back in. But with voice to text, I can just kind of talk through my answers to these questions. So that's very handy. So now we're driving alignment around the vision, really trying to make sure Claude Code understands our intention, how we're designing the system, um, and the questions it's asking will also push me to be more specific in what I need out of the system. So we'll let Claude cook here for a second. It said, yep, we're gonna analyze the brand. We're gonna do analysis. Looking all good. Questions go deeper. All right, Claude, let's go. Receive some PPTX files, run an analysis, generate knowledge brand system, and then we review and refine. That's right. So brand extraction, yes, that's right. For HTML to PPTX. So template filling approach. We're cloning slides, cloning templates, HTML. We're going to generate and, you know, try to clone through writing code. So for HTML to PPTX, as you can see in our architecture and PRD documents, we want a hybrid approach. The goal is to have Claude use the templates in two ways. One, there are just some slides that should be the same template every time and just filled in. There are other slides where the template's a starting point. And I want Claude to use the starting point template, but then creatively create elements within that template slide to bring it to life, to make it beautiful, give it a good brand look, give it a good learning experience look. So it should be able to iterate over the template slide seamlessly, elegantly, to bring it to life. So that might require the HTML to PPTX approach, in addition to clone the slide, and then how is Claude going to create visual elements within that template slide? That's kind of the need we have. Let's see. When we provide templates, what format should we expect? I'll provide PPTX files, and I'll also provide PNG images, just so we have both to reference. I'll do that for the exemplars as well. Okay. How do those answers clarify? So, given some more answers, we're refining our, aligning our understanding further. And then we're going to get started. So, I think this is right. We want to start by defining the directory structure. And then we need to build the template analyzer, build a brand extractor, and set up our dependencies. So those seem like first steps to me. We've got to get the information into the system for Claude to then use to generate new slide decks. So let's continue refining here. Structural fill only, content, creation. Okay. Technical challenge for mode 2. Predefined enhancement library, generative creation, hybrid. Hybrid's probably best here. Controlled vocabulary of enhancements, yeah. So I think hybrid is the best approach here. I mean, really, I'm looking for consistency from deck to deck, both in terms of some of the administrative slides, like the teacher-facing slides, the title slide, the section divider slides, the lesson outline slides, the learning objective slides. All of those should look the same, feel the same, kind of relatively be in the same place, the same order. But then the content slides between those stable slides, that's where we want to pull in templates as a starting point and iterate over them creatively, using our brand guideline, using good learning experience design. But I want Claude to have the freedom to take the raw content input and say, okay, what's the best way to visually communicate this information? And have the flexibility to follow, its design to high fidelity rather than feeling constrained. So that's my answer. It sounds like maybe option C. Remaining uncertainties. Right. What's the most elegant way for Claude to create visual elements? So here's where I'm looking for, a new .claude for this tool, where I expect us to kind of use sub-agents, use different tools, the Python to PPTX, the HTML to image, SVG. I'm not sure. I need you to kind of research given our use case, given our success criteria, what's the best approach here? How can we architect a system that will set Claude up for success? Because remember, Claude is going to run this software. I'm going to give it a lesson input and say, okay, Claude, run through our build plan, use the directory, use subagents, use tools, and generate a new deck that adheres to the design principles I provided. Okay, so continuing to refine, this is time well spent. If we dove in kind of headlong and said, hey, okay, you got the docs, just go build. One, it would try to boil the ocean and just print out a solution super fast. And then we would spend a huge amount of time iterating and iterating and iterating. Um, the goal here is to spend most of the time defining the project really clearly. The more precise we can get with Claude, the more likely it is to succeed in developing the project. So now it's doing some research on the technical approaches available to us. This is really good. So kind of Claude Desktop did a first pass at this. Now we're doing it again. I think it's always good to get a second opinion when you're doing this level of design with LLMs. So we'll let it cook and see what it comes up with. Claude just did some research, took about 5 minutes or so. Let's see how Claude should create visual elements. We've got Python to PPTX. We definitely want to use that. HTML to PPTX. There's no good way of generating PPTX files with HTML content, but it's improving. Okay. Common patterns. Structured JSON validation, then Python to PPTX. Okay. Two-mode system. That seems pretty good. So just reading through here, what are the strategies the tool will use to achieve our goals? This is looking pretty good. So the last thing I just want to align with is, Claude Code or Claude Desktop makes some really killer slides. And I just want to make sure we're capturing that capability here. So, okay, this all looks good and makes sense. One thing I just want to make sure we're learning from, Claude Desktop, when I ask it to make a slide deck, really makes elegant, beautiful, complex, well-designed slides. Is the recommendation you're making here including an understanding of how Claude Code or Claude Desktop is currently able to make such beautiful slides, and can we learn from that and develop that into our system, into this hybrid approach you're exploring? In terms of your questions, alternative. I think either architecture could work, but again, let's be really driven by the outcomes we're looking for. I'm going to give you a bunch of exemplars, and they've been made by hand. There'll be interesting idiosyncratic choices about where different visual elements are, where different text elements are, visual elements. We want to learn from all that and be able to give Claude the freedom to create similarly idiosyncratic slides that still adhere to brand and learning design patterns for any given slide, and then a good pattern across slides. So, let's keep that in mind, but talk to me about, how we might do that in my question. It made PPTX files. I thought it was making HTML files. So they look okay. So I think we can use this approach. Let's just verify a couple things. We definitely want to go with a hybrid approach here. Because the HTML to PPTX conversion, I think will give Claude the most creative freedom because Claude is strongest in writing code. Um, but we want to make sure it's a hybrid approach because we don't want to use it for every slide. And we want to make sure we're able to clone in templates to those HTML generated slides and then iterate over them creatively and then convert them back into PPTX. But there'll be plenty of slides where we're just cloning the template. And perhaps there will be times where we just want to use a Python to PPTX script as well. So let's take that hybrid approach. What do you think? So we're getting close here. I think we're getting really close. And once we settle on alignment, then I'll have it update our vision documents and we'll start breaking it down into themes, epics, and features. So let's see what we've got here. Getting close. Let's try to wrap this up. So we've got 3 paths. We're going to clone templates. We've got Python to PPTX. We've got HTML to PPTX. Okay, great. Just looking at different paths. Yeah, that looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Okay, I think this is looking pretty good. And it's asking, it wants to make sure we're aligned, which is great. Claude Code decides path per slide. Yep, that looks fine. So yeah, path selection, Claude decides. We want this to be a largely unsupervised system where I'm providing inputs, exemplars, templates, the lesson content. Claude generates. I evaluate the output, provide feedback, and we improve the system until we get it really working super well. So Claude should be making those path decisions. HTML to PPTX conversion. We need both. We need editability and we need fidelity. So, I mean, it has to be editable. I don't want an output I can't edit. So that's the priority. So let's focus on that. Template informed HTML. Yeah, Claude extracts design language from the templates and generates based on that. So it's basically, yeah, clone the template in HTML and then iterate over it creatively and then bring it back to PPTX. So with all that being said, I think we're ready to update our vision documents. So let's do that. So now we'll update vision documents, and then once Claude's done with that, we'll start doing the breakdown to themes, epics, and features. Cool. So vision documents have been updated. That's great. So what do we need to do next? We've got vision layer aligned. We need to start building, creating directory structure and begin phase 0. That makes sense to me. And then we need to map out our themes and all that. So, all right, let's make sure we're using doc-driven dev, updating our docs as we move, also using our sub-agents, and let's build out the architecture and begin, or directory structure and begin phase 0. So, we'll let Claude get going with that, and then we'll come back, populate the themes, take one theme down to an epic, or multiple epics, take an epic down to features, take a feature, break it into tasks. The tasks that's like a Claude Code native tool it uses to manage its own work. You can kind of see that here. Here's the first list of tasks it's given itself. And it'll just complete these. And this is so granular, I don't bother tracking it in our docs. So now with next steps option A and B, are we following doc-driven dev? Are you saying we need to do that to continue with phase 0 before we break things down into themes, epics, and features? And sometimes it gets a little visually wonky. Just adjust. Let's see. Yeah, so sometimes you have to catch it. It's jumping ahead here. So we're done with vision, but we need to do some of these steps. Yeah, yeah, because we're managing the development of this tool, so we don't want to jump towards doing anything with the tool yet. Okay, so now we've got to define the themes, so let's do that. So now Claude will build those themes. Hopefully it will invoke, let's make sure. When you build the themes, please be sure to use the right subagents to do that. Let's make sure it does that. Because remember, we have a subagent for building themes and features and epics and all that. So you can see Claude has just completed generating our L1 themes. So it's kind of broken up the work we need to do. We've got to build a design system. We need to build some intelligence around understanding the content inputs, an engine for generating the new slide assets, quality validation. So that's an important step. Having Claude look at the output even before I do, and try to understand if it aligns with expectations. And finally, orchestration learning. What is this one? Let's see. End-to-end workflow and enable continuous system. I see. So it's the system learning, right? Great. We definitely need that. So we're going to do a similar exercise now. We've got to break down each theme into epics, and then we'll break down each epic into features, and so on. I'll show you the results of that. Right here, if you look at how Claude is handling this, it's really nice. I said, yeah, let's make the L2 epics. So it spawned our epic designer subagents, which we've defined in our .claude. So it's running 5 agents in parallel, which is really nice. So it's making 5 epics all at once. And these are probably all under one theme. Yeah. So theme 1 epics. So each of these agents is making epics per the 5 L1 themes we have. So we're getting some nice efficiencies there. And, the Claude UI is confirming that it's using subagents, which is really nice because each of those is specialized for building out each layer of documentation. So we'll continue doing this until we get all our documentation, at least through the first epic, done. So we've just knocked out our themes for each of the epics. This is pretty nice. So we're really building out the larger context. And why that's nice is we are mapping dependencies, we're mapping architectural decisions, we're mapping how the pieces fit together. So Claude will have that as a point of reference as it develops, but we're also creating smaller and smaller pieces for Claude to pick up at any given moment and develop. So the next step is features. Here I want to just focus on, let's say, the features within the first epic. So let's map out the features just for the first epic, and we'll start developing once we check those. So we'll do a final kind of step here of granularity. We'll map out features for this first epic. Here are the epics, yeah. So theme 1, we have 4 epics. So we'll map out the features for these, and then we'll start developing them. We just did a lot of documentation generation, and now we're getting down to the features. So I can go in and read what these features are. Template inventory system, lesson parsing feature. Sorry, these are showing up off screen. I got it open up there. We've got template clone feature, validation engine, and master workflow feature. Okay, so those seem like reasonable starting points. I guess to keep myself oriented to the project, I'm going to ask Claude. All right, we just built a lot of documentation. We're down to kind of the first feature set that we want to implement. Tell me how we're going to manage this project. What's the order that we're developing the overall code base for this tool, just so I have a model in my mind of how we're approaching the project. So I'm asking Claude to produce that for me, and that's going to help me stay oriented to what my expectations should be as we move forward. I don't really have a clear mental model yet of what we need to build first. I have some ideas. We could build a brand guideline extractor tool first. We could build the sub agents that will develop the outputs first. So I just want to have an understanding of how Claude's approaching this so I can think about it with it together. Okay, so let's take a look. Right. Okay, so we've got to understand the templates first before we build the structure of the system. That makes sense. Great. Okay, so it's asking me, I've got to provide my templates and my inputs now. We'll start. See, this is interesting. Like theme 1, extract knowledge. So the question is like, how does the system do that? Have we built that yet? So I see, I'll provide lesson markdown template, any other exemplars, but I see these themes here: extract knowledge, parse, generate slides. So, right, we're in theme 1. We need to build the system's capabilities to extract the knowledge from the templates. That's what we need to build next, right? Let's see what it says. So I had to take a little detour. I noticed that it hadn't made a .Claude for the system itself. This is like a confusing thing of trying to build Claude-powered software. You have a .Claude that I'm using during development, but once we're done, I will remove that from the directory, along with docs and some of these other development assets. But we're going to need a new .Claude for the tool itself. So I had to make sure it was capturing that need, so we weren't losing that during development. So I had that added in. Now back to features, we want to start building out our features for the first theme. So, all right, all good. I've provided the exemplars and templates that you need in our inputs folder, so you have that, so we can start on the feature development. Please be sure to follow doc-driven development and sub-agents, and use sub-agents. Always good to throw that reminder in. And now we're on our way. So this has been a video. It's been a long video. I've been working on this now for 2 hours. But what I've shown you is bringing in that uh, kind of vibe coding directory into my project directory, the .claude, the different subagents, commands, skills, claude.md that defines what doc-driven dev looks like, our doc folder, the spec hierarchy of folders, we're going from PRDs, alignment, breaking down the PRD into vision, themes, epics, features, and once all that's in place, asking Claude to start developing. So it's looking at some of those inputs I provided, trying to understand what kind of inputs we're going to get in general for the system, and using that to then scope what those features need to look like. Ideally, it will follow TDD and use our subagents to go through the dev cycle. And we'll just continue doing that until we've built the whole tool. So, long video, but I hope this was helpful.